Hello everyone. I've been getting a lot of questions recently on Windows activation, especially for education scenarios. Traditionally, a lot of schools are using a KMS way of activating Windows on their school devices. However, many schools are not in session today. Their devices are not at school. They're at home. They're with the teachers and students as they learn remote. And there becomes a concern over time that these devices are going to lose their activation in Windows, and they'll get that watermark on the bottom right-hand side. They won't be able to change their wallpaper. And that's something that IT professionals are starting to have questions about. So in this video, we're going to go over 3 scenarios of alternative ways to activate Windows if you're using KMS today. So one thing we're going to look at is if you are using KMS, but you're not using Intune, we're going to look at the Windows subscription activation. So how do you bring those devices into Azure Active Directory and then use the subscription activation as part of your Microsoft license agreement to bring those back into an activated state. The second thing we're going to look at is if they are Intune managed devices, how you would actually take your MAK key from your Volume Licensing Center and paste that MAK key into either Microsoft Endpoint Manager or Intune for Education and deploy those MAK keys and activate those devices through Intune. And the third scenario we'll look at is probably maybe the worst case scenario is you have a whole bunch of home devices running Windows 10 Home that you need to activate. And how do you do that? You can't join them to Azure Active Directory because they're running the home SKU, not the pro SKU. But because we're in education, there is an education solution where the partner, if the licenses are purchased through CSP, can go in and request a MAK key for the customer to take their Windows 10 Home devices and move those up to Windows 10 Education, and how you could then wrap that MAK key in a provisioning package that you could share via OneDrive, and then have the end user go to that shared file and double click on that provisioning package in order to activate those devices, then make it so that they can join Azure Active Directory and kind of bring everybody up to speed. Obviously, my personal opinion is let's get everyone in Intune for education. But without further ado, let's get started. The first scenario we'll look at is if the school uses KMS, however, students are remote using school devices. How is Windows activated in that fashion? And in this scenario, we're going to look at Windows activation through subscription. When we start setting up Windows activation based on subscription, there's 4 things that we need to look at. Number 1, for education, the device needs to first have Windows 10 Pro EDU version 1903 or newer. The second thing is the device has to have a digital license. It's shipped with the license built into it for Windows 10 Pro Education. Number 3, the education tenant needs the appropriate license to upgrade that device from Pro EDU to EDU. And number 4, that device needs to be joined to Azure AD or hybrid Azure AD joined. And that's because the user needs to log into the computer with their Azure Active Directory so that the license, the Windows 10 subscription we assign to that user will flow through the device and activate it. So let's take a look at, assuming that we've set up Azure Active Directory to allow users to join devices. We understand that users would have to log in with their AAD credentials. Let's talk about how we actually assign that Windows 10 subscription license. I'm going to go to my Microsoft 365 Admin Center. I'm going to drill into my users, go to my active users, and we'll find Arden on the list here of our sandbox users. And we're going to manage the product licenses that Arden has. In this demo environment, Arden School is an A5 customer, so they have Microsoft 365 A5 for faculty and A5 for students. And if we scroll down the apps that are included, if we go all the way down the list, we're eventually going to get to Windows 10 Enterprise. We want to make sure that that's checked. That means that if Arden is signing in via Azure AD to a Windows device, that is going to, and the device is already Pro EDU, that's going to switch it over to Education Enterprise. Now, we can do this individually in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. We can also do this in Azure Active Directory through group-based licensing. So if we have all of our devices in a group, or all of our users in a group, we can assign that license out to all of the users. Also in Azure Active Directory, we need to set the policy that users can join devices to Azure Active Directory. Probably create a step-by-step guide, because the end user is going to need, if they're on a locally managed device today, they're going to need to sign in with their local account. Go to Settings, go to Accounts, access Work or School, and click the Add button, and then select Register in Azure Active Directory and sign in with their Microsoft 365 credentials, which will change how they sign in forevermore on that device, where they'll sign in with those Azure Active Directory credentials. But it does move the school away from relying on KMS and does solve that activation issue. It also moves the school towards Azure Active Directory, and on a personal note, closer to Intune for education. The second scenario is if the school has already adopted Intune, whether just using the MEM console or using Intune for education. They're using Intune, devices are registered in Azure Active Directory, the MDM authority is set to Intune, and policies are being pushed. Right? So a school might be pushing Windows Update policies, maybe deploying apps through Intune for education. They can also do Windows activation through Intune, through MEM policies. So let's take a quick look at what that looks like in the Intune for Education portal. I'm going to jump into Groups. And in my groups, I'll go to Windows Device Settings. And towards the bottom, there's Updates and Upgrades. I'll expand to that. Scroll to the bottom of where we would control Windows Update, and then we see Edition Upgrade. I'm going to select to assign a new edition upgrade profile, and we're going to just name this one Sample. And here we can upgrade the Windows device to Education or Enterprise. And whichever I select, I'm going to need to enter that MAC key. So if I can just go into my Volume Licensing Center and copy and paste it from there. And once I click Save, as those devices check in, as those users sign into those devices are going to kick over from Pro EDU to Windows 10 Education. This is different than the scenario 1 we looked at before, where it was subscription-based. Here we're using a MAC key. If you're not using Intune for Education, you're more comfortable in Microsoft Endpoint Manager, you can do the same thing. We'll go to Devices, and in Devices, we'll go to Configuration Policies. We'll create a new profile, and this profile is going to be specific to Windows 10. And we're going to find Edition Upgrade, and we'll walk through the wizard. We'll name this one Sample as well. And then we'll choose which edition we'd like to upgrade to. Obviously, because we're not in the education version, we're going to get a lot more options here than we see in Intune for education. Enter the MAK key and continue the tutorial or the wizard. Our third scenario is if the device shipped with Windows 10 Home on it. We know a lot of schools were scrambling for devices as they responded to the pandemic and a lot of school closures, remote learning. And those devices that are running home cannot join Intune, cannot join Azure Active Directory. So what do we do with those devices? Luckily, we have a help doc, and all documentation is going to be in the description. But we have a help doc which instructs our partners on how to go and get MAK keys for those affected education customers so that they can upgrade their home devices to a version of Windows where they can join Azure Active Directory to do subscription-based activation or set up Intune to use their MAK keys and continue getting some of the benefits of modern management. So on my screen, you're going to see our help article that we published in October. It went live in November, and what this article outlines is how a partner who sold Microsoft 365 licenses via CSP can go into their Partner Center dashboard and open a request for their education customers that have home devices. We have a template of what needs to be added to that support request. And then the response is a MAK key for those affected devices. Now, with that MAK key, a school administrator, school IT needs to then distribute that to the affected devices. Now, you could say that you could just copy paste the MAK key, make a video, and the end users can go through and copy paste that in to activate Windows. You can also take it one step farther and install Windows Configuration Designer on your admin's machine and wrap that in a provisioning package. So you create a PPKG file that has the MAK key sitting within it, and then host that PPKG file in a shared OneDrive, and then email out a link to everyone that all they have to do is double click on that link and install the provisioning package, which will set the MAK key, and this would be a great time to join it to Azure Active Directory and start managing Intune for education. So a link to that is also found. So these are just 3 scenarios that we looked at there. I can think of several more, but most important, I want to hear your questions in the comment section of this video. Try to do a follow-up to answer some of those questions. I know a lot of you are struggling with we had KMS, we have KMS on-prem, the devices aren't on-prem, and we're seeing some Windows activation watermarks on the bottom of your screen or of our screens. Is it something to panic about? And if the background of your computer was very important to you, then it's something to worry about if you had some customizations that are now turned off as a result. But short term, especially for the schools out there that are juggling so much already, it's probably not a lot to panic about. It's not something to be super concerned about, but it is an opportunity to switch to other means of activation, either through MEM, Intune for education, Windows subscription, anything that's going to allow your students, your staff to be more mobile, especially in our remote everything world. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is, as technical, a little bit of licensing as well. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If this channel brings value to you, please subscribe. If you think it will bring value to others, please share. Thank you so much for the partners out there that are doing the work with the educators, with the school staff, the school leaders, to make learning possible today. Thank you so much for the work that you do in education, and for the school leaders and teachers out there that are making learning possible for our students during these challenging times. Thank you so much. I say that as a former teacher and as a parent. I am super thankful. All right, have a great day, everyone.